Yeah, go ahead and show your screen.
Okay.
And we'll put that up there on hold. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to let you guys all know that we have a lot of the NCO staff with us this time because they're all very interested in hearing about your data analyses. So we have Teresa.
Hi.
Hi, you guys I think probably all know Teresa, right? And then we have Kathy Gerst.
Hello.
Hello.
And Erin Posthumus.
Hello.
And then we have Alyssa remotely, of course, because she's no longer here physically with us.
Hi.
And then we also have Juliana, who is doing some data analysis for us on the Tucson Phenology Trail. She's going to share what she's learned in a couple minutes. Great. So yay, welcome everybody. Really quickly before we get started, I'll just tell my NCO folks in case they're wondering how we usually do these meetings. I like to start out by having everybody celebrate an achievement that they've had for their network coordinating over the last month. So I think we'll do that, and then we'll go into our discussion topic of data analysis. We try to keep the call to just about an hour because I know we're all super busy. So each of the three folks that are sharing stuff, I said to maybe keep it to 10 or 15 minutes, and then we can just chit-chat as we go along. So, and then of course, if anybody has any questions, just stop me and interrupt, and that's fine. So what I'm going to do is just go down my list of people that I have in the order on the GoToMeeting to ask them to share our achievements. So Beth, it looks like you are the lucky winner to go first today.
Great. I think that I shared some information last time about our new partnership with Maine Audubon and loon monitors, and so I was actually going to suggest that Esperanza, perhaps if she's willing, could talk a little bit about her work with a pollen group in the state, which is just beginning but could become a bigger area of programming for us.
Okay, sure. Hey, Esperanza.
Hey, thanks, Beth. Yeah, I've been talking with a group of folks in Maine and elsewhere, actually. They're really interested in looking at pollen from different perspectives based on a changing climate. And we are just starting to really coordinate efforts and talk about, how could we use phenology in Maine in looking at the issues regarding pollen. So anyway, we had they had a summit that I wasn't able to attend in Portland, Maine, and had people from other states as well. And then they had a follow-up meeting that I was able to attend in Orono last week. And I know that they have been talking with Teresa, and so Teresa, it'd be great to connect with you on some of the ideas that they have, which I won't go into now, but stay tuned. But it's exciting to actually be working with some of the folks that are doing research on pollen and gauge their interest in phenology for this purpose.
Yeah, that's exciting. I did have a call with them about a month ago, and I had forgotten about it. So that's really exciting to hear that that's still active.
It is very much so, and we've got some follow-up steps next. So we'll follow through with that and see where it goes, and I'll be in touch. Also, Beth and I have determined that we have funding for a 7-month position for assistant coordinator next year. So we're thrilled about that.
Great.
Nice. Good job. Cool. Thanks for sharing. That's exciting. And next on our list, we have Edessa from the Central Arizona Phenology Trail. Edessa, are you there? She's muted. Edessa. All right, we'll come back to Edessa. How about Mary from Denver?
Hi, I'm here.
Yay, you have a microphone today.
I do. I feel like a big kid.
How's it going?
Good. Things are good. The only thing that's kind of new since the last time we talked is last week I gave a talk to about 30 of the docents that we have here at the gardens on the Phenology Trail and phenology in general to kind of further bring them up to speed on Phenology, how to use your website, and how to give that information to visitors to our science pyramid, because that's one of the science chats that we do in our science pyramid is on phenology.
Nice.
So,
that's good. How did it go?
It was well attended, and people found it interesting. So it's good to see people getting excited about phenology.
Nice. Good job.
Hey.
Okay. I don't know if Edessa's unmuted now. I hear her not. So if she gets unmuted, we'd be happy to hear something from her too. So pop in a little bit. Okay, so why don't we just go ahead and get started with our data analysis stuff. So Carissa, do you want to jump right in?
Sure.
And you can give us your update too. Do you have an update you want to share?
Oh, sure. So one thing I recently was able to get, last week was able to get about 9 of the NYPP sites together in the same room for a kind of strategy session on, you know, whether the sort of connected trail system was working well for each group and all that. And I consider it a success, though, you know, I would say some of the reports weren't all great because it's, you know, challenging for various reasons for certain organizations and all that. But it was a success to get everybody in the same room to talk about how to make some changes and move forward with the project in a way that, you know, that works. I think that's kind of a necessary thing to keep the project going long term and keep the sites invested. So that was a great thing. And then we also kind of hit a mark just recently. We wanted to register 25 sites within the network for 2015. So we have 26, so we slightly exceeded that goal, which was great. Doesn't mean all of them are up and running and collecting data, but they're at least registered and have some sort of plan in some stage of action. So that was a nice goal. And then the last one brings me to the analysis that I'll chat about, and that is that we did get some small private family foundation funding to kind of take this project I'm about to talk about to take it to the next step and do a bigger analysis and get some curriculum developed and stuff like that. So that was very good news because right now it's in this very rough preliminary stage, which I will share with you today. So basically what happened was a site in the area, one of my partner sites, they discovered this old data set from the 1800s, and I think I had mentioned this on the last call. And they were able to digitize the records from this old data set. Sorry, I didn't have time to put anything into kind of a PowerPoint form, so I'm just going to kind of you can see my screen, right? Yep. Okay, so I'll just kind of walk everybody through, you know, basically what we were working with. So we got this basically a Excel file that had all of these records that from the 1800s. It's kind of all over the place. There was a lot of, so for example, you can see here, you know, a lot of the records were entered with different names and this and that. So we took some time to basically go through and try to figure out how many historical records had overlap with the modern records. So in other words, what species were being tracked and what's sort of the quantity of each species, because some species had a lot of data records and some had very few, and some of them that had a lot were not ones that we have on our modern list. So it took a little time and identified 5 species that had enough overlap, and then started narrowing down by county which records could actually match the current records. So I'm going to go now to show you a map. This is called, they're calling it the progress of the seasons, the folks who found the historical data set and have this historical data browser and so forth. But basically, these academies, and academies are organizations, they were like basically, high school, community college type of places, or that version in history of what we would consider now like a, training, kind of pre-college training type of places. So it's interesting because it utilized the organizational structure, but then also citizen scientists who were, typically younger folks who were, going into a professional stage in their life. So this is an example of where these academies were located across New York. And we have the New York Phenology Project, similar, there are sites that we have, particularly in this area is where we started. So we were able to kind of cross list the academies that were closest to the current sites that we have now. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So basically we ended up narrowing it down to 6 different sites in the lower Hudson Valley with, and I'm going to get to one more. Oops, sorry. Birth plan for my baby, not part of this presentation. So basically we got these historical organization sites, and then these are the current NYPP sites that we use. And we were able to basically get a range of, when the historical data and the recent data, the range of the flowering dates for these 5 species. And then what we did, and this is again a very sort of informal preliminary analysis, not the kind of thing that, is publishable, but it allowed us to just take a look at this and say, is this something that, if we took some time and, spent time with this and got some funding, could we, turn this into an analysis that could, give us some really great information about how climate has affected some of the native species here in the East. So we just averaged the dates, the average flowering date, and then did a comparison and came up with this graph. So it's nothing fancy or dramatic. It's just sort of a snapshot into is this a possibility to utilize our modern NYPP data set and explore this historical comparison. So we're pretty excited about it, about moving forward with it. We ended up doing an event recently, excuse me, this is something called the Teaching the Hudson Valley. It was a teachers conference, and part of our mission with this project is to, at the very least, utilize this modern historic data, because it's got a great story, right? Like there are this network of organizations back in the 1800s doing this same work that we're doing now and engaging, citizen scientists who include even students, which I think is a really neat thing. So we put together this this poster that basically describes the project, and then showed this data in a nice way, and then got together with these teachers and ended up doing sort of a little mini workshop to talk to them about what they might be able to utilize with this historical data browser and with this collaboration and even with this kind of ability to do these sort of small preliminary analyses to dive into the data, because it was all done in a pretty easy way using Excel, as I showed you. I didn't walk you through every step, but we just basically pulled out, cut and paste and pulled out different things in Excel. And some of the teachers we spoke to, do that kind of work with their more advanced high school classes. And so it's all in the kind of early stages of, both a project that we're trying to connect with education efforts in the region, but also something that will likely lead to a robust analysis. Though obviously we're not at that stage yet, but we're on our way. So I thought that might be a interesting example to show everybody with, because I know these historic data sets pop up now and again. And I remember from our last call, some of our sites are doing more active outreach to try to gather these type of historic data sets. So, so this is just one example of a comparison that is possible and relatively easy to do. This was all done without, real funding or anything. This is just something that we were able to pull off. So yeah, that's about it. Any questions?
No questions, but that's very cool. That's a really interesting or nice way to look at those old data compared to the new ones.
Yeah, thanks. It was really fun to see how it all shook out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really great to have that historical perspective, and that's a way to really engage the volunteers in a local project that is of interest, and maybe they remember some of the things that were being observed before, so it really kind of gives it more, meat to the participation instead of it just being data. It gives it like that human spin.
Yeah, I found, when talking to the site the other day, one of the things that a lot of people echoed was the difficulty in maintaining volunteer engagement when when you're just focused on building a long-term data set, that ends up being harder to sell to volunteers in the sense that, unless it turns into kind of a practice for them, you know what I mean? It's from a data perspective, just sort of adding to this larger body of data and the long-term value of it, is a little bit harder to sell. So some of the sites were, struggling with that. So I think having these type of things, a historical data set to compare to, you can end up saying, well, within just a couple of years, we might be able to, do an analysis with this historical data set. And then, of course, things like, being able to look at coupled species interactions and some of the other stuff that we've all talked about. That's another way to get that kind of more immediate gratification that your data can be analyzed, in more than just from the long-term perspective, and certainly the visualization tool that you guys are hopefully will get a chance to see more of. That's another way, I think, to do it too. But anyway, yeah, historical data is I think a fun thing for people to get involved with.
Yeah, great. Anybody have any other questions?
Oh, but Lorianne, it makes me wonder, are there any of these historical data sets that have been, or is there any plan to put them into the NPN database so that they can be looked at that way if you can match up bases well enough?
Yeah, there's a light plan to do that. It's kind of a lot of work, and we have a queue of data sets that people have sent to us where our data manager, Ellen, is starting to think about ways to bring them in, but it takes a little time to crosswalk them because you do have to look at the data and see what they're saying and then compare it to the protocols that we have. And we also have on our website a place where people can catalog data sets without making them part of the NPN database.
Oh,
but,
cool.
If you guys want to add anything else.
I like that. That's cool.
Sure. There's a couple workshops coming up in the next few months that are actually focused on developing a common language for the purpose of integrating data sets that use different definitions and phenophases. So I think we're marching in that direction.
Nice.
Great.
Okay, good, thanks. So I think Edessa is unmuted now. So she might want to share an achievement, if we can just do that really fast.
Okay, I'll do that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We added a new trail at Prescott Creeks in what's called Watson Woods. We have a south trail, and now we have a north trail. And we have weekly monitoring occurring there too. And also at the Highland Center for Natural History, they have a natural history docent program where they train natural history docents. And several of the docents have taken on long-term monitoring on our phenology trails as part of their project. Each person has to have a project that they do. So that's it.
Nice. That's good news. Cool. And I think we also had, is that Molly from Santa Fe Botanic Garden? Are you there? There's a line through her phone. I don't know what that means.
There we go. Sorry.
Oh, there you go. Is it Molly?
I try to keep it muted so I can have conversations in the background.
That's fine.
Molly and Allison.
Hi.
And,
do you want to share something?
Allison, do you have any tips that you want to share? Well, we've got 4 people on our citizen science team. 2 of us are doing plants and dragonflies, and the other 2 are doing bird nesting and dragonflies, and we're really excited about it.
Cool. Great. Well, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Yeah, sorry we were running a minute late.
No problem. It's quite all right.
But this is really exciting, so thank you guys for presenting on this today.
Sure, no problem. We're glad to do it. Okay, let's see. Who wants to go next? Beth or Juliana? Dun, dun, dun.
I can go.
Okay. Juliana shall go.
I'm happy to. Either way is fine.
Okay. Well, let's do
Okay.
Juliana because I already clicked on making her a presenter.
Great.
Okay. See if it works. Yay.
Okay, so like Lorianne mentioned, oh, can you see? Okay, great. So I've been working for the last month around looking at the Tucson data and just looking at what it looks like and what we could maybe do with it for more research. So I started just looking at the data itself. So I looked at how much there was. So you can see this is sort of an excerpt of the first table I made, which was looking at the different partner groups that we had. So, and then breaking it up to see what each site looked like. So you can see, for example, the Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum. It's in Tucson. They had 5 observations, and there was 1 species at the location and then 1 individual. But for other sites, it could be maybe there were 2 different species, but then there were 10 individuals or something like that. And then also the time frame that they were observing it, because there would be, I think, for example, the Great Basin Bird Observatory would have like a really intense period of observations, maybe over the summer for our camp, and then would totally drop off, which makes the data kind of harder to work with. So it was interesting to see which sites had more consistent data versus which ones had the most. And then I looked a bit about what people were observing, so which species was the most popular and how much data there was for those species. And then I kind of looked at it visually as well to see what proportion of the observations were coming from one site. And actually, it looks like, at least for Arizona, the vast majority was from Tucson, and then also from like 2 or 3 sites. So that's kind of interesting for anyone who's going to look at the data, that it's pretty biased towards Tucson and then these 3 sites. And then I also looked at what the quality was like. And I did this sort of in like 2 different ways. The first way was with frequency versus time period. So I took it from the raw data and just looked at how many observations there were and how many of those were positive versus how many of those were negative. And the example on the left with the hummingbirds is probably the most extreme example that I found, where there were really clear periods. So I think here, this one in the fall was from a fall course at the University of Arizona, where they would all go out and take a bunch of observations, but as soon as the course ended, there were no more. And maybe these 2 here are from phenology workshops, where afterwards people went out and observed. But generally, it was really hard to tell what the hummingbirds were doing throughout the year, because outside of that, there were no observations. And then with the ocotillo, certain species had different trends. I think with the ocotillo, it was really clear that school groups were observing them, because in the summer months, there were slim to no observations whatsoever, which is kind of hard because the ocotillo depends a lot on the rain, and we get a lot of rain in the summer. So that was interesting. And then the other way I looked at it was using the summarized data for if you were going to look at onset dates, and then looking at, of those observations, how many had a prior no within the last 2 weeks, which is, I think, relatively generous, but I found that maybe like 1/3 to 1/2 of the observations didn't meet that qualification. So it was really hard to use it to find sort of an accurate onset date. So then once I'd kind of laid that out, I moved forward and looked at species individually. So this is an example of, I started with bufflegrass because it had the most total observations. And I started looking at the phenophases, so which ones are the most relevant. Their frequencies would kind of change over time, as I think we redefined what different phenophases made, or maybe improved them, or described them differently. So for this case with bufflegrass, I chose to look at initial growth and leafing. And so I started comparing it to climate, so mainly precipitation and temperature, and I got temperature from the DayMet, from the Tucson airport, and precipitation from the same spot, but through NOAA. And these 2 graphs I thought were some of the most interesting, because especially with precipitation, you can kind of see that the bufflegrass initial growth tracks it a bit. And then what I thought was interesting about I decided to use the temperature maximums and minimums versus average, because a lot of the models seem to use maximums and minimums. And it was kind of interesting to compare year to year. So this one is 2014. And for most of bufflegrass's phenophases, it was sort of wider, so it took up more time when there was more precipitation and when there were lower temperatures, versus, say, in 2013, there was less precipitation and higher temperatures. And for most phenophases, the event itself was a lot narrower. So that's kind of interesting. And then I went through and did that for, I think, 4 other species, maybe like 3 or 4 phenophases for each. And that was sort of the layout of, I'm writing a summary report now to kind of characterize the data. And then the last part in that report is just some next steps that I thought of, or that I came across while I was looking at the data. And so to me, the most important thing would be the more consistent data. So those gaps, maybe targeting the gaps for school groups, or if it's a summer workshop, maybe talking about the importance of doing it all year, maybe trying to reduce the number of days since the prior no, maybe a bit more geographic diversity. Since it is interesting that we haven't studied desert phenology as much, it would also be interesting to compare high desert versus low desert, and then coming up with more exciting questions to talk to volunteers about. And then I just wanted to ask you all also what other things you think might be useful to include in the report, or maybe some different ways to look at the data to make it more useful to people.
This is really cool. Thank you for all of your efforts.
Oh yeah, it's fun.
Is one of the things that you'll be summarizing in there ways in which participants might really hone in on their participation in ways that could make the data the most useful?
You mean as in like the time periods, or you mean?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like a couple of things that I heard you say that made it the analysis difficult were that you didn't always have the yes preceded by the no. Sorry. And that people, what was the other thing? There was a big one, now I forgot it.
The big gaps in the
yeah, I think that was it. Yeah,
right.
the seasonal ups and fluctuations and stuff. So yeah, just like the importance of really, if you make this commitment, that if you can pay attention, really trying to capture those transitions is the biggest thing that we're after. So it seems like that's a pretty important take-home message. And if I'm understanding you correctly, is the audience for what you guys are doing the participants themselves, or is it broader than that?
I think it should be, because, and this is valuable to all the networks, which a lot of you guys are doing a better job of that than we are, just because we don't have the staff time to do it. But I think having this information available to the participants to tell them that, because I do always say, record your no data, make sure it's consistent, try to do it long term, and that's just me saying it. But if they could see something visually that shows the data and how much less useful it is without having that consistent information, then I think we could probably really encourage them to keep doing it. It's probably not a lot we can do about the school groups not observing summer, but the snowbirds or whoever else goes away, but the other people that are here can probably work on that.
Yeah, that's how I that's what I envisioned, that this would be like a resource for the groups in Tucson to see what the data says, and then also as an opportunity for us to like show how the data can be improved in a more tangible way than just telling people. And this also happened because originally we were, Juliana Juliana is a NASA space grant intern. She's with the NPN all year, and eventually she'll do a project doing more rigorous statistical analyses looking at climate drivers. But we realized we had to step back from that a bit, and because we didn't even know necessarily what the interesting questions or what the shape of the data looked like. So this was a first step in doing those more scientific analyses, just to like paint a picture of what the data is generally showing and looks like. I think you've done such a good job so far.
Yeah.
And I think also if we want to ask questions, or if volunteers want to find their own questions, the graphs are really easy. Like I find even me just looking at them, it's like, wow, if we could observe this all day or all year and then compare it, even just with precipitation or something, if you see a trend one year, it's much more exciting even just over a short time frame.
Yep. Yeah.
It seems like what you're doing here too is a model for other groups, and maybe you've already thought of that too, but like kind of just describing that, well, we wanted to do this analytical deep exploration of the data, but we had to do the kind of descriptive stuff first. We had to figure out what we had in terms of species and time frame and phenophases and which data we know how many total records we have, but can you use all of them, or is like only half of them really very useful, given the fact that they're not preceded by a no within any reasonable amount of time. And so yeah, I don't know, you're probably already communicating that with group leaders. But it does seem like a really nice example of the whole process.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, Juliana.
Yeah.
Excited that I got to see it today.
Okay.
Anybody have any other questions? Okay. Thanks. Should we switch to Beth and Esperanza?
Sure. Yep, I'm all set.
Okay. I just made you presenter, so see if it works.
Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
I click. Okay. Okay, great. So Esperanza wasn't on the call when I offered to do this, so but I will say, Esperanza, please just jump in and fill in wherever I'm missing stuff. But what I did is I put together a few slides to show how we're pulling data from NPN and or using NPN resources to share with our volunteers, and what types of information our researchers who kind of collaborate with us are using, both to show how this is helping their own research through research publications, but also to help us support our volunteers. So I will just get started. So again, I've shared this before, but we are a collaboration between the University of Maine Cooperative Extension and Maine Sea Grant, and we work very closely with a large number of partners, both state and a nonprofit associated with Acadia National Park at the Scudic. Our partners in New Hampshire are kind of our counterparts, New Hampshire Sea Grant and Cooperative Extension. There. So before we show any graphs that we've created, we show this historical graph created by Aldo Leopold and Sarah Elizabeth Jones about looking at marsh phenology from, I think, the 1940s. And Abe Miller-Rushing, who's the science coordinator at Acadia National Park and whom many of you know, shared with us, but it's kind of nice because it shows that phenology has been around for a long time, and the ways that we're thinking about the data are just kind of changing and evolving, and the uses for the data are evolving over time. And so this is an example of phenology that's setting up kind of a static phenology calendar about when different plants are flowering in a marsh. And then we go and talk about interannual variability and long-term change that can be measured by phenology, so that this graph would have changed dramatically, probably, we think, if someone were to go back and do the same thing now. And so we only have so far 5 years of data, but you can already see this interannual variability. And years like people tend to have sort of short memories, but everyone remembers how warm the spring of 20. And so you can see that dandelions, common dandelions, are one of our species. You can see that there's just a very obvious blip in our data showing that that was an anomalous year. And I think that really helps people to understand that these are changes you can see on the graph, as well as just moments in time that you can observe yourself outside. And this graph, just for the sake of explanation, this is the first recorded growth by individuals in Maine and New Hampshire, and these are an average of all of the different days of the year across our Maine and New Hampshire observers. Okay, and so then we use the visualization tool to show folks where our sites are, and in doing so, point out the fact that we could use a lot more observations up here. Granted, our population is much smaller, but any observations that we can get to fill in these gaps in Down East Maine can really help us to fill out our understanding of what's going on. And then we show people how our observations are contributing to these NPN's research and other research campaigns, such as the Green Wave Northeast through NPN. And we can very clearly, folks can say, oh, we're part of this larger thing that's happening. And I think it's really helpful to kind of inspire people as well as provide feedback on what it is that they're contributing. And here's the gridded spring indices. We share that as well. Jake Welton prepared when he did a webinar for us, for our volunteers, just kind of showing the frequency that people are observing different species. But this was his idea to show it this way. And it's helpful because it's pointing out species where we might need a few more observations, but then it helps us to know which species are people observing more often, and so how we can tailor our outreach materials to cater to their interests as well as what's important for the research. Here's another example of a slide that Jake had originally prepared, but we've since added more data to it, and this kind of box and whisker plot is really useful, both for helping people who might not normally be comfortable understand how we're looking at it, and and then we don't consider that error. A lot of people were taught in school to think about a lot of variability as error, but we're really thinking about it more holistically in terms of what is happening, and it's really helpful to see where those outliers are, and maybe there's something different happening in that place or at that time. And again, here's our red maples. Similar, you have a much more variability in 2012. It was an anomalous year overall, but you see that not all of the observations were earlier. So our state has a lot of unique climate zones, and red maples occur through. This is another way of looking at it. This is from the NPN, looking at the leaf presence, timing of leaf presence in red and sugar maples during the 2014 season. And so then you're just looking at the different phenophases we're observing and how they're overlapping over throughout the time. And so we're looking at different observations together of those different phenophases. And Maine from 2011 to 2014, and this one is really and then in the winter you can really see in the summer you see them move to the inland waters and then back, so that's pretty cool as well. This is a poster. So we have 10 different sites where people are monitoring Ascophyllum nodosum, which is a coastal seaweed. We call it rockweed is the common name. And it's a commercial species, but it's also a very important habitat species and kind of nursery area. And Jessica Mullen is a phycologist. Her research expertise is in seaweeds. And so she's really taken the lead, working with us, helping to figure out what a rockweed, because it's not a species that's in NPN. Can you all hear me?
You're kind of breaking up a little bit, so I think we're getting it, but
is it better now?
It kind of comes and goes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just carry on now because I think it would be hard for me to, or I could stop and call in by phone and you could move on, and then I could finish up in a minute once I can call in by phone.
Sure. Do you want to try that?
Sure.
Okay.
So you could talk with somebody else, and I'll call in.
We'll just discuss amongst ourselves. We'll wait for you.
It does look really cool. I really do want to hear about the rockweed.
Yeah.
I don't know much about it.
I guess. Okay. She won't log all the way out.
This is Esperanza. I'll let Beth continue when she gets back on, but yeah, the rockweed has been of great interest, both in New Hampshire and Maine. We now have sites along the coast that are, we think, pretty good sites and observers that will continue this because, as we know, we can have a lot of sites throughout the state, but it's harder to get for folks to have access to the shoreline. So anyway, we've got some pretty good volunteer effort going on there. Head Beth.
I'm back now.
I was just talking about, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, is that you, Esperanza?
Yeah, I was just saying how, we've established a good group of volunteers, observers along the coast now in both New Hampshire and Maine. So, but we've only been doing this really for, we've got data on some sites for 3 years, but really in the last 2.
For the rockweed?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I don't know where I started cutting out, but did you hear my introduction to the rockweed piece where we're working with Jessica Mullen, who's a researcher at Maine Maritime Academy?
Yes, we heard that part.
Okay. So she and we together have established a total of, I think, 10 sites in Maine, and then there are, as Esperanza mentioned, a couple more in New Hampshire. And so we're looking at the timing of the reproductive phase of the rockweed, and we set up, we're using something very similar in terms of our phenophases. It's actually originally an NSF Globe protocol that we're using, but because algae is not quite a plant or doesn't follow the animal monitoring, it's been a challenge to do it within the NPM framework. So we've created something kind of sort of a tandem observing database. But Jessie has been analyzing it, Jessie and our assistant coordinator, Alyssa, and so she's created this poster looking at rockweed phenology, establishing an intertidal monitoring program with citizen science, and reevaluating a historical model for gamete release. And so she has data loggers out looking at temperature and salinity at these locations, as well as folks monitoring the rockweed. Some of our folks and some of her grad students and she herself are doing the other sites. And so the two that you see in the poster, I'm sorry, it's a small one. I'll go to my next slide. It's a blow-up of it. These are just two of the different sites. This is Schoodic, which is where Acadia National Park is, the Schoodic side, and Belfast, which is in Mid-Coast, Maine. And you can just see that the timing of the different phases is different at the different locations. And then she's working through that. But this is a poster that has been displayed at the Acadia Science Symposium. We showed it at the Northeast Sea Grant Regional Meeting. Jessie and one of her students showed it at a conference in Ireland. And so it's kind of getting around. And it's really nice partnership for us because we can show the poster just as well as she can. But it's useful for both of our purposes because it's created so it's clear enough, and the phenology, the concept of observing phenology is easy enough for anyone to grasp that it's not hard for us to describe what these graphs are showing.
Yeah, and I might just mention, Beth, too, that the reproductive phenophases are temperature dependent. So we also equip our volunteers with water quality instruments, both temperature handheld temperature probes, as well as salinity refractometers, and yeah, so it's a scientific protocol that was started by Globe, but increased in in better efficiency and better data through Jessie Mullen's assistance.
And so she'll download something that looks kind of like this, and then she'll help us create graphs to make sense of what it is. So you're looking at something more like that. And then from there, she's helped us create those posters. So it's a really nice partnership, and we'd like to get to the point where we have something like that for other species as well. So those are kind of the examples that I had. Esperanza, did you want to share anything else or add to what I said? Before we ask the question.
No, I mean you were also working, as Beth said, with Acadia National Park and Schoodic Institute, and one of the students working on our PhD from Richard Primack's lab has been working on a data set, a long-term historical data set from Oxbow, Maine, and putting it together with new data or more recent data that's put into our the NN database through Signs of the Season. So we're looking forward to her results, and so stay tuned on that.
Sounds good. That's cool. So you just said that somebody is working with a historical data set there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Oxbow is in far northern Maine in Aroostook County, and so.
Right. We had to look it up. We didn't know where it was either.
But it's an amazing data set from. I can't remember how many years, but a lot.
I think it's almost 50.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Really an old data set, so it's great. It's very complete. So, yeah, it's very exciting.
Cool. Does anybody have any questions for these gals?
Yeah,
okay, well,
I had a question. Do you have recommendations for where to find these data sets? Because that's something we're definitely struggling with, is for historical data sets, like where they tend to be stored, or have you guys just sort of happened across them?
This is Esperanza, and we have, I mean, we know right now of a couple of people, one that Beth doesn't even know about because I just had a meeting with her, but through the pollen folks, she's a researcher on pollen, and she shared with me that she has a 25 or 30-year data set on a lot of deciduous trees and other things that are around her property. So it's just word of mouth how we've found them so far, and I'm not sure how Caitlin McDonough found hers. She's the one that's the researcher that's working on the Oxbow data set. But there's also another observer that that we met just through media, sort of advertising our program and our trainings that came forward to us. But the problem is, of course, as was mentioned prior, was that it's so hard to get these data in a form that can be put into being put into a database.
Yeah.
Beth, did you want to say something else?
Well, I was just going to say exactly that in fact finding them hasn't been our challenge, because people are so eager to think that these things, treasured notebooks of their grandparents or whomever, might actually be useful, that they bring them up to us and, oh, this person has this and this person has that. And so knowing about them has not been so much our challenge as figuring out staffing and time to digitize them. And I think that's an issue that it would be just so great to have longer term data sets going back for this place, because while we can tie into some of the historic lilac data, for example, that the NPN has, it doesn't resonate nearly as well if it's a local data set and you can kind of share the story about the people who collected the data.
Yeah.
Although we're happy for that lilac data.
Yes, exactly. But it would be wonderful to be able to say, oh, great, well, I'll just put my 10 grad students right on that, and every time someone shares an example with us.
Right. And I know that Rebecca Montgomery from Minnesota would say the same thing, because she has a data set that's a local data set that someone had come up to her and said, I have this thing, and that's her challenge as well, is trying to figure out what to do with it and how to make it work, or that sort of thing. So.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if that was helpful, Molly.
Yeah, no, that's
the answer is we don't have the answer.
Oh, but just knowing that it's coming from these sort of individual people that approach you, so trying to reach out to some of our, I don't know, our local pueblos, or I think will be a good source.
Yeah, for us it's just come through at our training saying, oh, this person or that person has all these other data, you should talk to them.
Right. And I think the one thing I was going to say that's a nice segue, for me looking at this with the lens of engaging people in observing, I think taking everything through that full process of having somebody bring to you a data set that is their family's data set, and sharing it in that personal way, like we talked about before, really gets people more engaged in the project like this, because they can relate to it. And it's not just, they're sending their data that you're asking them to contribute off to some place that they never hear about again. So, but it really gives us material to work with to kind of locally inspire people to do stuff like that. So, does anybody have any other thoughts about this? I think this was great to see how you guys have been looking at your data and how you've been using it and sharing it back with the observers. I don't know if anybody has anything else they want to.
Oh, I just second that. It's inspirational listening to and seeing the work that you're doing with it, and it makes me think about more things I need to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you.
Sure. Time and money. If we only had more time and more money.
Yeah. Like everything, right?
Right, exactly. Good. Okay.
This today, though, this has been really helpful for us.
Yeah, great. I'm glad. We can plan to do it again soon too, if you guys want. I mean, if you want to make this topic something a little bit more regular, we could do that as well, as you guys are piecing things together. Or we could just pop it into some of our other monthly calls that we're doing. So I'm here to help you, whatever you guys need.
Great.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I guess I'll say thank you, guys, for sharing. Thanks to Juliana and Beth and Esperanza and Carissa, who did jump off, but thanks to her for taking the time to share with us here at the NCO, too.
It is really
what you guys are up to.
Stuff happening.
Yeah, it's nice to see stuff happening.
Yes. Thank you very much for putting this all together. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really helpful to see other examples, and I really appreciate it.
Good. I'm glad to do it.
And will all of these PowerPoints be posted somewhere?
Yeah, if you guys want to send them to me, I can put them together in slide format, if that's okay. And then I think it would be nice to share with the other folks that couldn't join us. And then also, I think if you guys don't mind, if I put together a slide deck for somebody, because I don't have a ton of local data, I can at least tell a story using what you guys have, because I don't really have that here. So yeah, if you don't mind, just send them to me and I'll bind them and send them back.
And I would love to share it in the partner newsletter too.
Oh, Erin said she would like to share it in the partner newsletter. Yeah, yeah. Sound good?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Talk to you
Thank
soon.
you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.